Let's move on to the losers. Let me know if you agree with these. Some of the losers of the NBA extension deadline starts with Tyler Herro. Tyler Herro came off of a career year last season, became extension eligible, and essentially didn't get an extension because the Miami Heat are prioritizing 2027. So I come off, me as Tyler Herro in this scenario, come off of one of the best years of my career for you. I make the All Star team. Mind you, I've already helped you as a second, third, tertiary option offensively go to the NBA Finals on multiple occurrences since being drafted 14th overall. And I'm in position to re-up in a real way. And granted, Tyler Herro is coming into the season injured, likely to miss opening night against the Orlando Magic. Cool. Understandable. On the other end, I think something about this summer that was very indicative of what I think is going to eventually be a tough, rude awakening for Tyler Herro this upcoming summer is the high volume shooting guard's value in the NBA has never been lower than what we saw this past summer. I mentioned Cam Thomas earlier as a guy who's a high volume scorer, a guy that can be a 20-point per night guy. I think he can do it on a winning team just as much as he can do it on a losing team. But I think nonetheless, your fill up the score sheet shooting guard that is a net negative defender, a player that you cannot rely on to, help you in terms of building a cohesive five-man unit because they rely so much on being on the ball. I think your score first, score only shooting guard is no longer seen the way they were when Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford were winning sixth man of the year all the time. I think you saw that with the value that the Charlotte Hornets didn't have to give up in the trade to get Colin Sexton. I think you see that in the lack of belief in investing long term into someone like Cam Thomas, who was really the brightest light for the Brooklyn Nets last season. And I think honestly might still be their only real quote unquote blue chip prospect on the roster currently, unless you really believe in Day'Ron Sharpe, who is kind of started the beginning of his career in and out of the lineup so much that you don't really know what he is just yet. So Tyler Herro is a player that I think for the Miami Heat, when you look at that 2027 summer, might be a guy that's not in the Miami Heat's long-term plans and might be a guy that you have to watch in 2026 in terms of that summer's free agency, a pretty stacked free agency class of its own, in its own right. Granted, 2027 is even crazier because they've got Giannis, Nikola Jokic, so on and so forth. But 2026 might be a time where we see Tyler Herro on the move because honestly, I think if Tyler Herro is in fringe all-star conversations again, and I think he has the chance to be able to do that, especially coming out of the Eastern Conference with the fact that certain players like, again, a player like Tyrese Halliburton, who in a weakened Eastern Conference would easily take up one of these guard spots normally when healthy. Tyler Herro has a chance to make the All-Star game again. He's going to command a decent amount, and I don't think that's going to favor them what they're trying to do in terms of trying to keep their books clear. But let's read a little bit more into it, right? Again, same CBS Sports article. Shout out to them because they are going to be driving a lot of this podcast, or at least the first half of it. Coming off of a career year, Herro is also extension eligible, but all indications are he won't be getting an extension from Miami right now. The Heat are prioritizing flexibility for the summer of 2027 when a number of big names could hit free agency. Again, I mentioned Giannis Antetokounmpo. Nikola Jokic is also in that summer as well. Miami has long looked to capitalize on their status as a free agent destination, but for a player like Herro, he will wonder why there's no urgency to lock him down long term. Herro proved last year he can be an offensive engine as a leading scorer, but like Trae Young, who we'll talk about in a minute, his deficiencies as a defender lead to questions about the ceiling of a team built around a player of that archetype. Again, we'll talk about that with Trae Young a little bit later. teams simply aren't as eager to offer max type deals to players of that profile anymore. Adding to some of the stress for Herro is that he's going to miss time to start this season after offseason foot surgery, and Miami isn't expected to be a strong contender even in a weakened Eastern Conference. That will make it tough for him to add another All Star appearance to his resume, and if the Heat aren't rushing to get a deal done with him off of his sensational 2024-25 campaign, one has to wonder what his market will look like in 2 summers. Now, actually, if I'm not mistaken, and I have to actually adjust this on the fly, Tyler Herro would become an unrestricted free agent in the summer of 2027, which I think actually doubles down on my point that although they would not be looking to make a deal with him now, there is always a chance for them to give him another extension, but the likelihood of it is all dependent on how this season goes. And now this article, unlike what I just said a second ago, this article says there's a likelihood that Tyler Herro misses too many games because he's already set to miss the first few weeks of the season, paired with the fact that obviously things happen throughout the nooks and crannies of a regular season, 82 games. Tyler Herro can miss more time due to nagging injuries and things of that nature. That what if he doesn't make the All-Star team this upcoming season? That could also be very detrimental for him because if they're playing hardball with him coming off of one of his best seasons of his career, if he comes off of a down year, maybe they treat him as a low priority in 2026 as well. And then in 2027, they let him walk with the anticipation of trying to bring in 2 max players to put next to Bam Adebayo. There's a real possibility of that. Tyler Herro could mess around and be left holding the bag, not just for this season, but for next season as a guy who's coming off an All-Star year, watches that All-Star year come and go, and then sees the 2027 summer open up, and he may be a coveted free agent, but that 27 class is one that Tyler Herro would probably be like in the 20s, or at least like somewhere between 15 to 20 in a ranking of the most impactful free agents of that summer, given that, all the players that are in that free agency class enter that free agency healthy, right? Because that'll obviously be a big factor as well. Sucks for Tyler Herro because this could also, like I said before, could be a real indication that the shelf life of Tyler Herro in a Miami Heat jersey could be very short, could be coming to a real end very, very soon. Someone else who could be in real question for how much longer they will be in their jersey is Trae Young. I mentioned beforehand the archetype of the net negative the defender when it comes to the point guard position, right? The point guard shooting guard position. The guy who can fill up the stat sheet as a scorer, or in Trae Young's case, also as a facilitator, but you can't build a real true infrastructure around him because he's so net negative of a defender, right? I'm going to just read what CBS Sports has to say, and then I'm going to build upon it. It says, there was a time not long ago where Young would have had a max extension waiting for him in July. The moment the Hawks could have offered it, but the moment the Hawks could have offered it. But as teams adapt to the new restriction of the apron era, stars like Young are no longer going to get those offers by default. The Hawks will seem willing to take this into the summer and let the market prove to Young what's out there for him if he chooses to decline his player option. To be clear, Young will be fine long term and will undoubtedly get a big payday next summer if he and the Hawks don't reach an extension during this season. That said, he's among the first young stars to face the apron squeeze after watching so many around him get locked in. Making matters more frustrating is that he finally has the kind of supporting cast around him in Atlanta that seems optimal for maximizing his strengths and masking his weaknesses, but he's not guaranteed to be in that situation long term. The good news for Young is that he will have the chance to show what he can do in an apparent ideal team environment, but even if that kind of prove it season shouldn't be necessary. Very, very simple. Trae Young may be one of the top 5 players under the most pressure this upcoming season. The reason I say that is because Trae Young is in a situation where the Atlanta Hawks have built life very good both for building around him and for building beyond him. What do I mean by that? The Orlando Magic are a team that have been discussed for Trae Young for quite some time, right? And there's a handful of different teams around the league that have put their name in the hat or at least have been thrown in the mix for the potential services of Trae Young moving forward. The Boston Celtics this summer was a team that came up. The Miami Heat have come up in the past. The Los Angeles Lakers are always in context for a potential Trae Young trade. Meaning that there's a real market for Trae Young, right? The Atlanta Hawks pick up Nickeil Alexander-Walker this summer. They trade for Kristaps Porzingis, who they're not in a rush to do a contract extension with either, by the way. You have Zachary Risachet on a cost-controlled contract, still moving within his first initial rookie signing, right? You have Jalon Johnson, who when healthy was a 20-10 player last season and was on way to being the most improved player in the league. His teammate, Dyson Daniels, had a breakout season in his first year with the Atlanta Hawks and was the most improved player in the NBA last year. The belief in Onyeka Okongwu is that he can be a real rotational center for that team, a la why they haven't traded him yet, despite the fact that they held on to Clint Capella for so long and they positioned themselves to build out their front court depth with what they did in the draft and, of course, bringing in Porzingis. All that to say that also they signed Luke Kennard. Should throw that out there. They've built this team to have real positional versatility. Nickeil Alexander-Walker could be a starting point guard in this league. I think could deservedly be a starting point guard in this league. Dyson Daniels is one of the better defensive point guards / defensive guards on the perimeter in the NBA. That was proven last season. So you have two net positive defenders at the point guard / shooting guard position to occupy that backcourt this upcoming year and for years to come. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a positive three-point shooter and a net positive defender. He proved that in his time with the Minnesota Timberwolves as a guy who came off the bench, and him and Jalen McDaniels were two game wreckers defensively on the perimeter for that team, and one of the best duos in terms of perimeter defenders in the NBA, also having that backdrop of having someone like Rudy Gobert as a defender in the paint to help man down the paint, right? Again, Zachary Risachet, internal improvement. Onyeka Okongwu, internal improvement. Jalon Johnson, internal improvement. You also make the trade with the New Orleans Pelicans to get arguably one of the best trade assets in recent memory. Like you're gonna have the New Orleans Pelicans first round pick going in next season. In a year where the Western Conference is so deep, the New Orleans Pelicans, even with Skinny Zion, even with getting Trey Murphy III back, they still might at best maybe be the 10th team in the Western Conference and make the play-in tournament. This is a Atlanta Hawks team that has built themselves. This is an Atlanta Hawks team that has built themselves for the now with Trae Young, the future with Trae Young, or a future without Trae Young, truthfully. And the ability to either get real assets for Trae Young and avoid having to pay him long term and keeping their books relatively clean while still having real strong production at the guard position is something that has to really be monitored over the next year to year and a half. Now, do I think that the Atlanta Hawks are going to come to a real extension with Trae Young? I genuinely believe so, because he is a franchise icon at this point, and he is a player that I think they have built a real infrastructure around, where now, as the lead guy with this build of roster, has the real capability of getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals as they did 3 or 4 seasons ago. I think without Trae Young, they still have a relatively high ceiling, but maybe they're just a perennial playoff team. Maybe they're what the Orlando Magic were once upon a time with Nikola Vucevic as their best player. Maybe they're what the Indiana Pacers were when it was Victor Oladipo as their best player. That fringe top 4 to top 6 Eastern Conference seed all the time, right? But not necessarily a team that can really go out and win a championship. I think that Trae Young provides the upside to still put you in that position. Some may not believe that. I genuinely believe that Trae Young can be the best player on a championship team. It's just that he requires a little bit more um special treatment in terms of the kind of roster construction he needs around him, a la big time defenders on the perimeter, real protection in the paint from a shot blocking perspective, and he does need other guys who can put the ball on the floor as drivers and slashers because he's a high level facilitator. But he commands so much attention offensively that if he doesn't have guys around him that can be efficient as cutters, be efficient as knockdown, catch and shoot 3-point shooters, it kind of limits the offense a ton. And it's why the offense is always stagnated so much for the Atlanta Hawks when he's not on the floor. It's very similar to Golden State with Stephen Curry. When Steph Curry is on the floor, their offense is top 5, top 7 in the league. When Steph Curry comes off the floor, it's like Steve Kerr doesn't know what to do with him. Doesn't know what to do with the offense. It's as if they don't know how to run things offensively in an efficient manner. And despite the fact that they're one of the best ball moving teams in the league, it seems like without Steph Curry on the floor, they don't know how to find efficient shot creation. And the same thing can honestly be said for the Atlanta Hawks. I think that Jalon Johnson alleviated a lot of that as his like point forward build came into fruition a lot more last year, but their lack of perimeter shooting took away the threat of having guys who could knock down threes at a high clip and that you could trust to also be, active offensively as a slashing option as well. Now you have Dyson, Zachary, Nikhil, Jalon Johnson is back. Luke Kennard's on the roster. Like Asa Newell, you drafted in the draft as well as a rim runner that can also be, a high level lob threat. Like everything says that with what they've done, this team should be in the mix for a top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference this year. And if Trae Young pulls that off, he will have an extension before the end of next summer. If this team underachieves, I think Trae Young will be on the trade block. That goes to show the volatility of this year for Trae Young, and it's why I believe that he is one of the top 5 players under the most pressure this upcoming season. I think I'll end up doing a podcast episode very much dedicated to that topic alone, but Trae Young is under the gun in ways that a lot of NBA superstars are not coming into this season. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Atlanta Hawks seem primed for life with or without him. And his individual production is going to be the determining factor as to whether or not they decide to go with him long term. I think they should sign him to a contract extension, but I also could see why they're a little hesitant.